Welcome to Tartarian Tales 65. We're back, and this one is inspired by Putin, Vladimir Putin, who supposedly said this as he declassified the Tartaria archives, which could be why it exploded onto the mainstream. But he says, at school we are taught that before the advent of Christianity we were all almost wild people. However, many facts contradict these fictions. For example, in the Encyclopedia Brittanica of 1771, the land of our ancestors is described as the largest and most developed state called the Great Tartarus. I didn't find that, but there are many documents and maps that support this. Some of them are in the Russian Geographical Society. Gotta find that. These and other artifacts, such as the Chandar plate, interesting, testify to us that the level of development of the civilization of our ancestors was incomparably higher than what we learn as official history tries to convince us. Nailed. This level is even higher than the current level of development of our civilization, by a long shot, I'll add. But, so if this is a quote by him or not, it kind of explains a lot, and I could see Trump and him uniting in the background for this type of information drop on the population. So I had to go and find and explore this Encyclopedia Britannica, and I think I came upon it before, but I never realized it was the first one. So I wanted to dive back, because how a massive 3,000 page volume of information on basically everything could just come out in 1 year is kind of interesting to me. So I wonder what preceded this, because something had to have. You can't just, I doubt people were just in a room and they're like, let's make a comprehensive educational treatise on the entire world and every single word in it. And I believe it had to have come from somewhere, some previous kind of book that's been wiped out. Or that was part of the plan. Part of the reset plan was to have a team of people assemble something like this. But it's very cool. You can find interesting stuff like this, like the moscus, a genus of quadrupeds. This is where we get the musk odor from. And at the bottom it says it is a native of Tartary. So musk is a native of Tartary? Very interesting. I wonder what else is there. But Tartary is all over this thing. So I decided to check out different cities and places like Tibet, one of the most powerful of the Tartar kingdoms, having China on the east and India on the west. And Russia, or Muscovy, a large empire comprehending a vast extent of country in the most northerly parts of Europe. St. Petersburg, Moscow, and they always include the latitude and longitude, which is awesome for finding other places. Little Russia, Red Russia, province of Poland, all these different kind of things. Transylvania. So I dug up a bunch of these, and then I came across Astracan, which I will read to you, because for some reason Astracan is way bigger than all these. We include the Kalmuk Tartars in Siberia, as they acknowledge themselves subject to the Empire of Russia. And this is all 1771. Scythia, northern parts of Europe and Asia, were anciently so called, which afterwards obtained the name of Tartary. You can kind of piece together a few interesting things, but again, it's from a certain controlled perspective. Kazan, province of Russia, lying between the province of Moscow on the west and Siberia on the east. All of these, Moscow, even Moscow, so small, one sentence. And which blows my mind when you see the size of the Astracan entry, which I will read. Mosquito, I found this interesting. A country of North America situated between those latitudes, probably Ecuador maybe, having the North Sea on the side in the north, Nicaragua on the south, and Honduras on the east. But Mosquito is actually a place. Egypt, this one's bigger, but look, that's only the size of Egypt. It's still only one paragraph and doesn't really tell too much that is of interesting. Constantinople, massive center of the old world universe, and boom, you only get a Metropolis and you only get a paragraph. Again, it says it's built on a triangle, which is very interesting because of the Boston video I did before. Assyria, ancient empire of Asia, comprehending the modern provinces of Kurdistan and more. Pegu, that's from some of the old Tartarian Tales, and Peking, the Tartar city, all there. 2 million people in Peking in that small 20-mile circumference. And now here is Astracan. This is a 2-page entry that I'm going to read to you about Astracan. And why does Astracan hold so much more importance than Tibet, than Moscow, than St. Petersburg, than Kazan, all those places, which I thought were really, really big in the old world. So some reason there's something much bigger about Astracan, and so I'm going to read it to you now and hope you enjoy it. I'll show some pics from Astracan, some art, and some other cool stuff, and I'll put a link to the encyclopedia below because I'm going to be diving further and further into this world because I've found a lot of good gems, and so I want to share them with you all. So here we go. Check out what they say about Astracan. So here we go, the province of Astracan in the Encyclopedia Brittanica, 1771. A province of Russia in the most easterly part of Europe, bounded on the north by Bulgaria and Baskyria, on the south by the Caspian Sea, on the west by the Volga, which divides it from the Nagayan Tartars and Don Cossacks, and on the east by the great ridge of mountains which part it from Great Tartary. The province extends from 46th to the 52nd degree of latitude. The summer is long and intensely hot. The winter continues about 3 months, so severe that the Volga is frozen, hard enough to bear loaded sledges. The soil is rich and fertile, but the Tartars who inhabit it are strangers to agriculture. On the western and southern sides of the Volga are heaths of a prodigious extent, sandy desert and uncultivated. These, however, produce vast quantities of fine transparent salt in pits, where the sun bakes and incrustates it to the thickness of an inch on the surface of the water. There are pits in the neighborhood of Astracan which yield this excellent salt in such abundance that any person may carry it off, paying at the rate of 1 farthing a pust, which is equal to 40 pounds. Wow. The metropolis, Astracan, is situated within the boundaries of Asia on an island called Dolgoi, about 60 English miles above the place where the Volga disembogues itself into the Caspian Sea. The city derives its name from Hadgi Tarken, Hadgee space Tarken. We must find more about him. A Tartar by whom it was founded. It was conquered by Iwan Basilowitz, recovered by the Tartars in the year I-668, and retaken by the Tsar, who employed for this purpose a great number of flat-bottomed vessels in which he transported his forces down the Volga from Kazan. The city of Astracan is about 2.5 miles in circumference, surrounded by a brick wall, which is now in a ruinous condition. But if we comprehend the suburbs, the circuit will be near 5 miles. The number of inhabitants amount to 70,000, including Armenians and Tartars, as well as a few Persians and Indians. So 70,000 people in this city, and there's a 2-page article on it. Tibet, in the Peking city, in Tartar city, had 2 million people in a square mile, and they had 1 sentence. Something interesting. The garrison consists of 6 regiments of the best Russian troops who, when this place was alarmed from the side of Persia, had in the adjacent plain erected a great number of small batteries to scour the fields and obstruct the approach of the enemy. The houses of Astracan are built of wood and generally mean and inconvenient. The higher parts of the city command a prospect of the Volga, which is here about 3 miles in breadth and exhibits a noble appearance. The marshy lands on the banks of it render the place very sickly in the summer. The earth, being impregnated with salt, is extremely fertile and produces abundance of fruit, the immoderate use of which is attended with epidemical distempers. Sickness is likewise the consequence of those annual changes in the atmosphere produced by the floods in spring and autumn. All around the city of Astracan, at the distance of 2 miles, are seen a great number of gardens, orchards, and vineyards, producing all sorts of herbs, roots, except cauliflowers. The grapes are counted so delicious that they are preserved in sand and transported to court by land carriage at a prodigious expense. Yet the wine of Astracan is very indifferent. The summer being generally dry, the inhabitants water their gardens by means of large wheels worked by wind or horses, which raise the water to the highest part of the garden, from whence it runs in trenches to refresh the roots of every single tree and plant. The neighboring country produces hares and partridges, plenty of quails in summer, with wild and waterfowl of all sorts in abundance. About 10 miles below Astracan is a small island called Bosmace, on which are built large storehouses for the salt, which is made about 12 miles to the eastward, and being brought hither in boats, is conveyed up the Volga in order to supply the country as far as Moscow and Tver. I'm not sure what that is. The quantity of salt annually dug for these purposes amounts to some millions of pounds, the exclusive property of which is claimed by the crown and yields a considerable revenue, for the soldiers and bulk of the people live almost entirely on bread and salt. The neighborhood of these salt works is of great advantage to the fisheries, which extend from hence to the Caspian Sea and reach to the southeast as far as Yak and even 100 miles above Tsaritsyn. The principal fish here caught are sturgeon, starlet, beluga, and asotra. These, being salted, are put on board of vessels and sent away in the spring for the use of the whole empire, even as far as Petersburg. But as fish may be kept fresh as long as it is frozen, the winter is no sooner set in than they transport great quantities of it by land through all the provinces of Russia. Of the roes of the fish called beluga, which are white, transparent, and of an agreeable flavor, the fishers here prepare the caviar, which is in so much esteem all over Europe. These fisheries were first established by one Tikhon Demidov, a carrier who settled in this place about half a century ago, his whole wealth consisting of 2 horses. By dint of skill and industry, he soon grew the richest merchant in this country, but his success became so alluring to the crown that of late years it hath engrossed some of the fisheries as well as the salt works. Very interesting. Might have to look him up too. Tikhon Demidov. From the latter end of July to the beginning of October, the country about Astracan is frequently infested with myriads of locusts, which darken the air in their progression from the north to the southward, and wherever they fall, consume the whole verdure of the earth. These insects can even live for some time under water, for when the wind blows across the Volga, vast numbers of them fall in clusters and are rolled ashore, and their wings are no sooner dry than they rise and take flight again. Heretofore the inhabitants of Astracan traded to Kuva and Bokhara, but at present these branches are lost, and their commerce is limited to Persia and the dominions of Russia. Even the trade to Persia is much diminished by the troubles of that country. Nevertheless, the commerce of Astracan is still considerable. A few years ago, the city maintained about 40 vessels from 1 to 200 tons burden for the Caspian traffic. Some of these belong to the government and are commanded by a commodore under the direction of the Admiralty. This office is generally well stocked with naval stores, which are sold occasionally to the merchants. The trading ships convey provisions to the frontier towns of Turkey and Keflar, situated on the Caspian Sea, and transport merchandise to several parts of Persia. Some years ago, the English-Russian Company opened a trade from Astracan to Persia over the Caspian Sea, and ships were built for that purpose. But this commerce was soon prohibited by the Tsarina in consequence of the mismanagement of an English factor and the jealousy of the Russians. The English. They're always in there. And the Russians, jeez. What is the true truth? The merchants of Astracan export to Persia, chiefly on account of the Armenians, red leather, linens, woolen cloths, and other European manufactures. In return, they import the commodities of Persia, particularly those manufactured at Kazan, such as silk sashes intermixed with gold for the use of the Poles, wrought silks and stuffs mixed with cotton, rice, cotton, rhubarb, and a small quantity of other drugs. But the chief commodity is raw silk. The government has engrossed the article of rhubarb, the greatest part of which is brought into Russia by the Tartars of Yakutsk, bordering on the eastern Tartars belonging to China. They travel through Siberia to Samura, thence to Kazan, and lastly to Moscow. The revenue of Astracan is computed at 150,000 rubles, or 33,000 pounds, arising chiefly from salt and fish. The city is ruled by a governor under the check of a chancery. He is nevertheless arbitrary enough and exercises oppression with impunity. The officers of the Admiralty and Custom House, having very small salaries, are open to corruption and extremely rapacious. At christening feasts, which are attended with great intemperance, the guests drink a kind of cherry brandy out of large goblets, and every person invited throws a present of money into the bed of the mother, who sits up with great formality to be saluted by the company. The Indians have a pagan temple at Astracan, in which they pay their adoration and make offerings of fruit to a very ugly, deformed idol. The priests of this pagoda use incense, beads, cups, and prostrations. The Tartars, on the contrary, hold idol worship in the utmost abomination. So there are some interesting things there. Mainly the fact that this encyclopedia decided to focus so much on it that it is just so different. I mean, they could have gone into all those details about every single one of those places. Tibet, Peking, Tartar City, all these places, Moscow, but they didn't. They only did it for Astracan. So something's interesting. Maybe there's something there. Maybe those names that I mentioned will lead us to discover a little more. Seems like something we got in that Aboriginal area where they worship that idol. Something happening there. Maybe those the extreme primitives, and this was, they were currently in a state of that was similar to ours today, where we're just like, something happened a couple hundred years ago. We have no idea what. Some reset, but we're trying to figure it out, and there are still some remnants of this old culture left in our town, worshiping these idols and these other things, but we don't know them. We'll just say they're quacks, and all this stuff and just move on. So I'm not really sure. But I am finding this encyclopedia very interesting, the way they word things, the way they, hopefully, I think, seem to leave clues as to what people need to dig under. And all of this, again, is just, this information has existed for so long until it was compiled into this encyclopedia. So what preceded it? Who was gathering all the information before? Or how long did it take these people to do it, supposedly? It would have to take decades to compile this much information, even with a nice team, I would imagine, editing it and all that. And then printing it, that's got to be quite a printing process, about 5,000 pages. So something cool. Definitely check out the link, explore it, see what else you can find. I kind of went looking for tartar and all this stuff, which also leads you to the discovery of cream of tartar, and the fact that tartar oil and cream of tartar and the process of making that were used in a lot of different medicines and remedies, and that's another thing that most likely has been altered into our present time in order to make us think something totally differently. The tartar, they turned that word into a bad word at one point, and now I wonder what aspects of life suffered. Could be a great healing aspect of the world and nature within the tartar kind of salt and acid that kind of forms from it. I got to dive more into that, but all of these things are in here. A lot of big sections. One big section on architecture. A lot of stuff on America, which I found very interesting. I'll probably go into that. But take a dive in the encyclopedia and see what you can find. And if you find anything good, share some links in the comments below, because I am digging and it is a lot of fun. Some good artwork, some good pictures, but something hidden as well. Something definitely hidden in the wording and in the writing and in the kind of subliminal aspects of it, as far similar to the way that this Astracan was so highlighted, so dominantly highlighted, as opposed to so many other cities. And I wonder what that is. What is the importance of it? Was it an ancient metropolis where those now natives were once thriving? Was it, who built that wall around the entire city, enclosing a 2-mile city, and now the wall's in ruins in 1770s when they were writing this. So who built that at one time? What was there? There's a lot of interesting temples and weird things all over the place, old relics. If you search Google Earth, you can find all kinds of stone things in the woods and different places. So this place was so developed, so nice, and the glimpse that we get from 1771 is still only a glimpse. We rarely have any accounts of what happened before this time period. And something clearly did. People didn't just appear. There's thousands of years of history lost that we are left with just shreds of broken clues to try and piece it all back together. And so we're doing a good job, slow and piece by piece, steady, and we will keep it going and unveil the mysteries that await us all and the discoveries that are yet to come. So, hope you all enjoyed this. Share it, enjoy it, whatever. Bless you all.